All right, everyone, welcome to the second part of Secure Our Streets 2023. And we're going to kick this off again with our second keynote guest of the day, Dr. Andre Weimerskirch. I'm sure most of you guys, or not, maybe all of you know him somehow, some way, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. First of all, Andre is Vice President of Platform Software, Cybersecurity, and Functional Safety at Lear Corporation in the US. Before that, Andre was at the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, also co-founded a cybersecurity company called eScript. Don't know if you've ever heard of that one. He's also very active in SAE ISO 21434 standardization, an adjunct faculty at the UMTRI, University of Michigan, and also on the advisory board of Black Harbor Cybersecurity. We have a great talk from him today. He's going to talk a little bit about the automotive security roadmap, a little bit about the history, a little bit about the situation today and where it's going tomorrow. So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to everybody Dr. Andre Weimerskirch. Andre, please, the stage is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, John. So thank you so much. I'm really happy and excited to be here today. Big thank you for John for the invitation. Big thank you for the entire team here for organizing everything so smoothless and making it very easy for me. So, as John already said, I will try to give a bit of an overview, a little bit of history around automotive security. I've been doing this for more than 20 years, actually. I think I started working on this like in 2002. So what is that, 21 years? And in these 21 years, there are lots and lots of initiatives, efforts, projects popped up. And I will give a bit of an overview of all these initiatives, well, of some of them, it's too many, but also look at where I believe there are gaps, where I believe all of this will go in the future, and try to provide some advice. So in terms of history, as I said, I started working on this a bit more than 20 years ago. But actually, at least I was told, everything automotive security started as early as the 80s. Very interesting story, I think. In the 80s, some car makers started to introduce remote-controlled door unlocking. It's like basically you had this small remote control at your key fob, and you could lock and unlock the doors with it. And some clever people figured out that you could use a learnable TV remote control to learn the code. And then you just replayed that code and the doors unlocked, and you could luckily not drive away the car. I think at that time there was still the physical key, but at least open the door, steal the stuff inside the car. And here we are 40 years later, and I think actually theft protection today is one of the most interesting, if not exciting, areas in automotive security. So here on the right side, I try to sort of correlate the time. So think about the y-axis here as the timeline, and then the x-axis is the hype level. So, for the majority of time until 2010, no one really cared much. And then I'm sure you're aware, San Diego, University of Washington, they had really interesting research, were even on 60 Minutes and TV here in the US. And still people didn't care much. And then Miller and Walasek came, they knew how to use and utilize the media. And there was this giant hype, something like 2015, 16, 17. And I think then it went down. And now we're on that trajectory to maturity, which I think is probably more healthy for this area than giant hypes. So I want to talk a little bit about what I call priorities. So I think originally when I started working in automotive security 20 years ago, everything was driven by damages. Car makers were concerned about their cars being stolen. They were concerned about mileage counters being manipulated in cars. People did that to sell their used cars at higher cost, chip tuning because it was warranty damages and so on. And only then later, basically, when the hype curve really exploded, a new factor came in, and that was the concern about mandates, meaning the government stepping in and saying, hey, you have to become more secure, or we will regulate this area. We will introduce legal mandates that you have to include certain security levels. And car makers obviously became fairly concerned about their reputation and about liability. So all these cost items. And that, I think that was when the hype curve exploded. And since then, since something like 6 years, I think, things changed fundamentally, somewhat quietly, but fundamentally, in that the expertise in this area exploded in the same way, in a good way. Far more people joined. I was told something like 1,000 people registered here. And, I don't know, 10 years ago, we would be something like 20 people here probably. So the expertise heavily increased, but also the industry came together, defined the standard that I'm sure you heard 1,000 times before, SAE ISO 21434. And if the automotive industry is good at something, it is in following processes very well, comply to them, and increasingly improve according to that process. So I feel today the focus in this area has shifted far more to compliance to the process, and that's good. That results in secure products, but also to efficiency. Since 5 years ago, it was all about how do we make our product secure. Today, it is a lot about how do we, make our product secure with at least effort as possible. So the new buzzwords, automation, smart tools. How can we, basically reduce our efforts, but keep the security at the same level? An area that I find super interesting is the threat landscape in automotive security. I almost, fairly regularly, I feel there's this awkward sense where we argue that we need to have huge or proper security in cars, plenty of security in cars. But the reality is, and that's good, no car was ever hacked with any safety implication. There was no harm so far. We know there are the areas like car theft where we need to stay up to date every single day. But when we talk about safety critical things, nothing ever happened. That's a great thing. And maybe one explanation is, hey, we're doing all a great job. But I think there are also other explanations that maybe that's not particularly interesting for an attacker. And so there is, I think this will a little bit change in the future. What I find extremely interesting is the areas that are particularly sort of targeted these days by attackers are, I keep repeating it, stealing cars. The other ones are infotainment systems. It's like stuff that you want the voice of Bruce Willis for your navigation system. So if you Google a bit, you find tons of these things. And the interesting change that is happening, if you look in many cars, that the infotainment system also displays safety relevant data. What I have in mind is particularly speed. It shows you the speed. And so if you combine this thing, people hacking into infotainment systems for whatever reasons, and there being safety relevant data being displayed, it's probably something we need to look after. But I feel, going back to what should we actually focus our efforts on? What exactly should we protect in cars? And I would see it much bigger. The car becomes a piece of the larger ecosystem. It connects to the cloud. It connects to your house. It can open your garage door, all that sort of stuff. It can use whatever AI voice command system like Siri and Alexa and so on. What exactly should we focus on? And I don't feel we fully understand that today. Stefan Savage actually gave a really, really interesting talk where he talked far more about this somewhat awkwardness around the threat landscape at ESCA USA. It was a virtual event during COVID. I'm not sure if there's a recording available, but I believe the slides are available on the ESCA webpage if you're interested in this. And again, as I said, I think we don't fully understand that today. So need far more research here. So if you looked at the title of my presentation, I talk about a map of initiatives and looking a little bit into the today and the future. And I brainstormed with John a couple of months ago, hey, how should I do this here in this presentation? And I had this idea of creating this giant map of initiatives and projects over the last 20 years, and then, using it to identify gaps. And I started doing it, and you can see the result here, where you probably can't even read what it says. And I quickly figured out, wow, it is so much. There's no way that I can put that on a slide, that I can cover this in a single talk, or that I even alone would be able to put together such a map. So what I did here for this talk is I picked a few areas that I find particularly interesting, but also it made me realize I'm not aware of any such overview of security, automotive security initiatives anywhere available. So I would love to get your feedback if you feel, hey, yeah, we should do this. And then, I would think about, hey, maybe I put this in the GitHub or so, have the community as a community, put this together, maybe as simple as a link to the initiative. So I would love to get your feedback. So for here, as I said, I just picked a few areas. First one is process. When I started working in corporate, John said a bit about my background, did startup, then university, corporate now. 7 years ago when I started, I thought process is this thing that, I don't know, it's just overhead, awkward, doesn't really have to make anything secure. Why do we need this? Totally changed my mind 7 years later. I think, the first thing is, I'm sure you know that, but just to emphasize that again, security is not like safety. In safety, especially physical safety, you take a car, you drive it against the next wall, and you measure how safe, how are the passengers of this car doing? How safe was it for them? Security, there's no equivalent. There's no magic box where you put your software or product in that magic box and it tells you, yep, X% security achieved. The best we can do is we can approximate by the quality of the process. Good process doesn't describe technologies. It will never tell you use this particular security technology and everything is great. It will include means of deriving during the process what technologies to use. What I can tell you also is you might totally ignore process. You might still be lucky and have a secure product. But on average, I can assure you, if you have a poor process and you do this 100 times, sometimes you have good luck. But on average, you will have bad luck and do a poor job. So, in some sense, my journey over these last 7 years, take the process serious. And, there's the 21434. There are many other good process frameworks, listed a few here. Give an example, how could a process look? That is the high-level view of what we are doing in my company. We follow the waterfall model. And what I found over the last years to be of most value is having what we call gate reviews. It's the cybersecurity gate review, CSGR. We have a few of them to really early on, as much possible as to the left, have these gate reviews, have your security team review details of the development and check, does that make sense? And if not, fix it early on, because then it's easy to fix. The other thing that I found most valuable is having veto power in the security team, that it's not just a review here, but it's a gate review. What that means is, if my team says, no, you need to fix that first before you can continue, that's very powerful. That creates a lot of awareness. A team will not fail in the same topic for a second time. They learn from this. They're like, oops, I can't continue. That's really painful. So the next time they are in this situation, they will do it right and then present it and be just fine. So, gate reviews and the power for us to say, no, you will not go to production, found the most valuable parts in here. All right. I already said process. Even now that, my mindset is totally changed around process, I still understand it's painful to follow a process. It can be frustrating to have the sense, I just need to generate this paperwork for process compliance. So very clear to me is the best process is actually a process that you don't feel, that's not visible even, where you're guided by tools, where you hopefully don't even know what the process is, but you're guided by tools. I can use the word guided, or you're basically forced by tools to do the right thing. Think about tools that don't allow you to check in new source code as long as the code hygiene is not okay, or tools that automatically find CWEs, that automatically find CVEs, and again, that don't allow you to move forward as long as these security issues are there. So I feel today we don't do enough around tools, especially automated tools in the development chain. Call it your DevSecOps. And we need to do much, much more here. The other thing is, the industry is a new buzz or hype word, agile. And I truly believe agile mechanisms will be necessary in the automotive industry. And today, the industry tries to figure out how to do it. Think about a future where your expectation is, every month I want to have an update in my car and get new cool software features, at least security fixes, safety fixes. So we have this idea of agile and sprints. And then we have security that is the exact opposite. We want everything very static, very well defined. So it's like two worlds colliding, agile and security. Safety, by the way, same thing. And I feel we need to work far more into this. Actually, Bill Mazzara and Yanbo Guo started that discussion. They presented their thoughts at the SAE World Congress earlier this year. And, I feel there's a lot more to do, how to combine these worlds. And I think it's extremely relevant. I will talk later about software-defined vehicles. We will only have software-defined vehicles if we can fix or figure out how to properly combine agile and security. And today, we don't really know. We somehow stuck it together, but I don't think we can claim that we know how to do it. Interesting question that I received many times and that I ask also many times others is, do we actually need these mandatory standards? Like mandatory in the sense of some regulation says, yeah, you must follow that a particular standard, or at least you must follow having good security. And concern that I raised many times is, doesn't that mean once we have a standard that we only do the minimal thing to reach the standard's target? Isn't that a problem? Shouldn't we, have the freedom to do much more and motivate companies to do much more? And so to approach those two questions, well, it is true. I think a standard clearly sets minimum targets and basically trains companies and all stakeholders meet those targets, but don't go above them. Why would you? Right? We are commercial entities. We don't want we want to do things cost efficient. I think to answer that question is we need to understand there are two areas in security. One is there are security areas where we are challenged on a daily basis. Car theft is one. The security of iPhones is another one. But in our area, car theft. Whatever the standard is, we are far more concerned about illegal businesses somewhere in the world who spend a lot of money to figure out how to hack into cars and steal them. And then the other areas, that's areas where I call it the Fukushima singularity, the nuclear power plant that exploded after a tsunami. We don't expect that. It's extremely low likelihoods, but the impact is drastic. And corporations, actually individuals, everyone, humans in general, are doing an extremely poor job in covering these scenarios because we say, this doesn't happen anyways. So low likelihood, extreme negative impact. I believe that's where we need the legal requirements for the good of society to say, yeah, you have to do this. So to start answering the questions, why would we do more than the standard? Why would we do more than the minimum requirements? Well, you don't need to. That's the good news. The standard, at least the ISO standard, is written in a way that if you do your job and you meet the minimum target, that's good enough. Don't do more. You just waste resources. The big if here is though, really, you have to do a good job. It implies that you already built in buffers that you can deal with individual security breaches because nothing is ever perfectly secure, that you have buffers included, that you can fix it in the field and so on. So just meet minimum requirements, you're good. That's perfect. I also do think that we do need more flexibility in our mindsets and our thinking. I personally feel we spend often too much time for electronics modules where I would say, no, forget it. There is no impact here, no negative impact really. We should really be able to limit that to its absolute minimum according to the standard. But then focus when we think about like telematics modules or safety functions in cars, spend far more time compared to, say, a seat module. And today I feel we don't have that flexibility, like on a telematics module, maybe we spend 2 to 3 times as much as on a seat module. And I think that difference, that delta should be much, much bigger in the sense of less for, the less security critical modules, far more for the more security critical products. So there's probably some space for improvement around the standards. But yeah, overall, I think mandatory standards, good thing. All right, so after this first block, I want to talk a bit more into technical stuff. And an area that's quite a hype area is everything: intrusion detection systems, vehicular security operations center, and software updates over the air. So KEYNOTE has actually been around for, I believe, a decade, if not longer by now. And I feel, when we talk about these IDS, we should think about it much broader than we usually do today. It's everything that detects anomalies. It can be network traffic, it can be on computing platforms, it can be based on, timing dependencies. It can be even metadata like CPU load, timing between calling functions, I don't know, whatever sensors you can think of to measure, is this thing okay or not? Do we see any anomalies in the pattern? My sense is we don't use today prevention. I often hear this word IDPS, P for prevention then. I think we use it in when it's very clearly deterministic rules, like firewalls. It's the wrong CAN ID that you wouldn't expect on that CAN line. Yeah, just discard the message. But when it's you use some machine learning or probabilistic rule to detect that maybe there's something funny, no, you will not respond to that. You will not react. You will trigger it, send it to your vSOC, to the cloud, and that's it. And I don't see that this will ever change. Good news is, my understanding is IDS makes it into the car. Actually, I do know that it did make it into cars, so it's actually happening. vSOCs, the same thing. They are starting being deployed. And I also didn't talk much about software updates, but I'm part of an initiative called Uptane. You can Google it. Same thing, makes it into cars. And so we have it figured out, I would say. Now, where I fear we can do more and better is to generalize all of these concepts. First thing is, about, I guess, 10 years ago, NHTSA, it's a part of a Department of Transportation, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they had this idea saying we should, much better understand how to test IDS systems. How do we compare two solutions? And so they hired me when I was at the University of Michigan, and we worked out criteria and procedures to test different IDS solutions from different companies. And we wrote it down. Unfortunately, I think it was never published, but I think it was a great idea. Define test strategies, analyze how to compare two solutions. I think overall as a community today, we do such a poor job. There's all these claims. Everyone claims they have the best product ever to protect us. And we should work far more together to understand how do we compare two products, like in a very objective, factual manner. I would, as I said, if you look for new research topics, I think that's a great one. But then also bigger, I think anomaly detection can be used for CAN, Ethernet, but it can be used for much more. One example that I actually worked on is for vehicle-to-vehicle communication. There's this idea that vehicles broadcast messages 10 times a second with their location, speed, and so on, and it will save a lot of our, will improve traffic a lot. We can use the same ideas. We just detect anomalies, report it to the cloud. It's called misbehavior authority. And here we go. We can use it for car theft. We can use it for self-driving vehicles. We can use it for safety. Whenever a self-driving car has a safety issue, do the same thing. That's an anomaly. Report it to the cloud, run your AI in the cloud, detect what went wrong, and then fix it. So this idea can be much broader. And the good news is there's this project, NSF-funded project called Pivot. I included a link here that exactly will provide the infrastructure to do it so that everyone can use automotive data and then put applications on that platform, and these applications can be VSOCs or anything related to this. A topic I want to talk about, because it's so often I feel forgotten, is privacy. I want to start with the good news here. I think it's possible to build really good privacy. So I was part of a team in vehicle-to-vehicle communication where we built, I would say, a privacy by design solution, and it works well. The good news is it's even in the international standards today. It protects privacy to a, I believe, level that we didn't know before. Same thing around EV charging. Frank Kagel pointed that out to me. He's one of the authors. They call their protocol Popcorn, and they worked out a protocol where they take today's EV charging and improved it in a way that none of the stakeholders, like car maker, EV charging supplier, energy supplier, knows anything about you. The bad news is their idea never made it into the actual protocol. So there you still pay a little bit with your privacy. But the cost is significant. I can tell you for V2X, it took us almost a decade to figure out how to do this. And obviously, we can't spend a decade of bunch of fairly well-paid engineers to figure out every detail around privacy. So I co-organized a Dachstuhl seminar. Dachstuhl is a fairly prestigious seminar series in Germany. And we organized 2 seminars around privacy of self-driving cars, where we considered the commercial, ethical, legal, and technical aspects of privacy. And one of my conclusions is that what we need is really a framework, guidance for industry, where we tell, hey, this is how you build privacy protecting solutions in an efficient, that's the important word, in an efficient manner. Something like this ISO 21434 for privacy. And as long as it takes like extremely specialized experts to figure it out, I don't think we will see it. The other interesting question that I have is like, how much should we even care about privacy? It comes back to what I said about the threat landscape. Do people even care? How much money should we spend? Maybe it turns out, no one really cares. And there's also no evil scenario in the future, and we shouldn't care. So I think we have these extreme opinions today, but would love to get a more quantitative model to understand what is actually a good sense or level for privacy. Right. I'll just skip over the slide. So it's V2V. There's a reference if you're interested in the details. So I want to talk a little bit about the future, self-driving cars. I think, everyone is excited about self-driving cars, even though it followed a little bit our hype curve in security. But fascinating area. So I included a few examples here around self-driving cars, and not sure how much you know about it, but the main focus, security in self-driving cars, I would say, is on the sensor security. Naturally, that's what defines self-driving cars, the sensors and what it does with the sensor input. And so one example that you see here is by Alfred Chen. He's a professor at the UC Irvine. He got his PhD at Michigan, and I know him quite well. He's generally doing fascinating stuff. So what he did here is, you see this cone. So this is a normal cone, and that's his cone. And I hope you can see it over the screen. It looks a little bit funny. It's like, every human will still recognize it as a cone. It seems as if it was in the rain for a few million years or so. But then he puts it here, has a LiDAR sensor and a camera. So the camera clearly, you know, as every human sees, yeah, there's a cone on the road. The LiDAR, that's the LiDAR picture that you see here, and in case you can't really see it. The LiDAR picture does not show that cone. So where the cone should be, there's nothing. So the LiDAR sensor just ignores that there's an object here. So it basically makes an object disappear. Very cool, right? Also, sort of a big problem if you are in self-driving car and you don't see objects in the real world and you just hit them. There's tons of interesting research. I can really refer you to Alfred. He has a great webpage. Morley, Mao, she's a professor at as well. M-City, I'm involved a lot in M-City, is a center at the University of Michigan where I chair the security working group. That's the majority of work we are doing, sensor security. And then there's this event AutoSec that Alfred and others initiated that seems to also focus a lot on this area. I have a few more examples here. You probably know this, where you manipulate a stop sign. This is the manipulated stop sign here on the right side. All of you will recognize, hey, that's a stop sign. The car will not. It will see a speed sign here. It will actually speed up rather than stopping. Fascinating, isn't it? It's a problem of the algorithm that reads the images. And then here's another one by Yulong Kao. He was again, PhD student at Michigan, where he did the opposite attack. He made an object appear like he spoofed an object where there isn't one. So tons of good stuff. The attacks focus both on the physical layer and basically the perception software that makes sense of the physical sensor data. If you look for ideas what to do in the next, I don't know, 5 decades, I'm pretty sure this area will develop in a similar way to car theft, and you will be busy. It will be a cat and mouse game, and you will be easily busy the next 50 years, either attacking or defending these systems. I think this will be a never-ending story. So I forgot that. Another example where you print out these, hope you can see it, patches, you put them on the road, and then the car thinks, oh, the road is going slightly different. Maybe you can see it. The car thinks the road goes to the left, and you might have bad luck and end up in the ditch. All right, I want to talk a bit about the future, even more so the future. And I start with vehicle architectures. Maybe this is all old news to you, but do it really quickly. Today's vehicle architectures, network architectures, they are very functional. That means we have like 100 electronics modules in the car, and each module does its single and somewhat simple function. And in the future here is on the right side, we will see far more a model like what we see in the PC world and the IT world today. We have a few powerful ECUs that represent, call it each a dozen or dozens of virtual ECUs. So simply said, they will run virtual machines, and each virtual machine represents the function of an ECU today. But they will also be far more service-oriented. And, you know, the way I heard someone saying, oh, do you think like in 20 years or 10 years, we basically put an iPhone in your car? And that iPhone just controls the entire self-driving car. And I think that's a good way of thinking it. Think of like, we replaced 150 ECUs today with like 3 iPhones in the future. We will have standard internet technologies, Ethernet, IP. I believe we will have to use much more off-the-shelf solutions to handle that complexity. I don't think today's model will keep working where every single car maker has their very proprietary software in cars. I think they need to use much more standard software. And then it gets interesting. So I would argue that hackers will gain a huge advantage because they are now moving in a world that they are familiar with. The big hurdles to get into this disappear. You can just connect your laptop with an Ethernet cable to the car and use your standard tools. Huge advantage. However, the defenders will gain the same advantage because they can use standard internet defense tools that started being developed something like 40 years ago. And I have to admit, I don't know who gets more of a benefit here. Do the attackers benefit from that, or more than the defenders, or is it the other way around? I don't think we can answer that today. Would be super interested in your opinions, but I think that will be an interesting change, and talk a bit more about that. I think we will see much more agile ideas, DevSecOps, everything automated to push out updates very quickly. I think we will get the idea of zero trust in cars. That's Bob Kerster's idea. I think we will see tons of different configurations possible in a car, that we need to use replaceable hardware, far more flexibility, trust models. I think we will struggle much more with supply chain security. Today, it's a topic, but because everything is so proprietary, I don't think it's a huge topic. But once, we just use standard software, we face the same supply chain issues that today's infrastructure is regularly hit with, where someone places malware and standard software, and 2 years later they utilize it and run a giant ransomware attack. Good thing is there's a solution, it's called Scudo. It's part of the Obtain initiative. But then also good things. Maybe we can start using iOS in cars, because iOS is probably one, if not the most consumer electronic software available today. Why not use it in cars? So I believe that software-defined vehicles will come with a huge paradigm shift. I think it will have far more security implications than self-driving cars. Everyone talks always about self-driving cars being the big changer. I don't think so. It's just a little bit, you have some more sensors and stuff. I think that software-defined vehicles, that will be the big game changer. I think that will define a new automotive security engineer that we need in the future. And the tough part is basically you still need to understand all the detailed embedded stuff, electronic stuff, CAN, Ethernet, all of this will not disappear. But you also need to understand the big IT security topics. So if you're pretty young, I would start getting into this. All right. Finally, last topic I have here. I want to talk a little bit about what I call the unknown. And maybe you know this, but there are fascinating attacks out there. So a team, I know some of them from the University of Michigan. So I'm a little bit biased, I guess, with Michigan. They figured out how to use acoustic signals, music, sound, to attack MEMS. That is microelectromechanical systems. As a small chip that can detect basically measurement, acceleration, and so on. So they use these acoustic waves or music, sound, to attack sensors. These sensors are used in cars, for instance, in airbag systems to detect whether your car crashed and the airbag should deploy. And they were able to manipulate what these sensors are reading. Good news is they were not able to deploy an airbag, but they could do other things. And so it was concerning enough that Bosch issued a statement on their webpage of like, that is a problem, and here's some guidance how you should install your MEMS controllers in a way that makes it more resilient against that attack. And why I'm mentioning that here is there's no way any one of us ever, like 5 years ago, would have ever, or 10 years ago, anticipated that something like this is possible. And there are more attacks like these. There's one called Light Commerce, similar team here at the University of Michigan. They use a laser that they shine on a smart a loudspeaker like Alexa, and they, by using the right, I guess, waves in the laser, they can inject voice commands that a human cannot hear to the microphone of the smart speaker. And they, these systems are getting deployed in cars, so you can tell the car, start the engine, stop the engine, play certain music. Again, no one of us would have ever anticipated something like this possible when we do our risk assessment before the development. So now the question is, how can we defend against that? Well, I listed a few items here. We can always put in security buffers. We should be ready to update anything software in a car, not just infotainment systems or telematics units or so. Every single bit that has a line of software, we should be able to update. We should really have plans ready for maybe temporarily or permanently turn off features in the car. If we just can't save it and we have to cut out the feature, we better have a plan to do it. But I wonder, do we need to do more? Do we need to have more agility? Are there ways of more agility? So I don't have an answer for that. What I do know is I believe in the traditional security world, IT, PCs, that isn't too much of a topic. And it does hit, Rowhammer, maybe you know this attack, that quite hit the PC world. It was an attack to the hardware that was very expensive to fix in software because it takes a lot of CPU cycles. Maybe you should do more research on this. All right, that brings me almost to the end. I want to talk a bit about the community. There's different communities, I think, in the automotive space, security space. I'm sure you know them, but in the end, there's like industry. I find ASRG fascinating. I have to admit, I don't know too much about ASRG. I haven't been too much involved. I just talked to John about it. I'm not sure if that is about me being located in the US, that it's more a European thing, because I have the sense when I talk to my colleagues here in the US, they're also not super aware. But there's these different communities, and my sense is each community is really useful and helpful, has a different focus, and I feel we should somehow push all of us to get these communities closer together. For instance, I wish industry and ASRG would collaborate much, much more. ASRG is this amazing pool of talents and expertise, technical expertise that an industry needs. And, I think industry is probably always a little bit shy. I call it shy. So, let's work on getting closer together, really get industry, academia, and developers closer together. And the easiest way of doing that is by getting these communities closer together. So that really brings me to my end, just to basically reflect, what do I feel are the main opportunities? Well, first one, anything that makes security engineers' jobs easier will be huge thing, tons of research needed, all sorts of automated tools, basically ideally where everything just happens automatically, including the code fixing. Technology, we will never be able to put together 100% secure code, systems, modules, cars. So anything that expands windows of vulnerabilities, I think will have a big future. Control flow integrity and so on. Threat landscape, I talked about that quite a bit. I don't think we fully understand the threat landscape. I often feel we focus our efforts on the wrong areas. I feel we should work much, much more on this. Yeah, and then I just talked about collaboration. We still have too much segmentation between the communities, I feel. All right. That was it for me here. So I have my email here. Anytime, please feel free to reach out to me. Very interested. As I said, I would love to get in more touch with the ASRG, and I mean this in the sense of the members, you. And so please don't be shy to reach out anytime. Thank you.
So, Andre, thank you so much for the very interesting and insightful presentation. Thank you. My English was failing me there for a minute. Yeah, so totally agree with what you're saying about the communities, technology, and so on. And as you can see from the reactions, I think a lot of the audience is also agreeing with your viewpoints here. We do have a few questions. I think we also have time for a few questions. I'm just going to go ahead. Please, everyone, remember that you can add your questions to the Q&A part and upvote or downvote. So I'm just going to go through here. So Scott is asking, basically, is chip tuning dead with good security controls being more common? Secure boots, defending cal data, and private key auth needed to tune the engine ECUs. What do you see there in the future of chip tuning?
Yeah. Hey, Scott. Good question. So when I started 20 years ago, giant topic. What happened was people tuned the engines, got, 100 horsepower more, and the car wasn't designed for it. So eventually something broke, the brakes or the engine just, exploded. And then they flashed the old firmware back in, went to the dealer and said, I don't know what happened, warranty issue. So the car makers had a particular interest in stopping this. So they invested a lot of effort into chip tuning. And I think today it is extremely tough to chip tune. So actually a colleague asked me a couple of years ago if I can help him. And so we tried, and it was, I think he found eventually a solution in the internet, but where you had to basically replace the entire ECU to do it. And I think that was like $1,000 thing. So yeah, car makers effectively stopped chip tuning today. Having said that, the tone changed a bit. There are still cars out there where you can chip tune, but the car makers changed it in a way that they have full control over it. Where you need to get something like send them the firmware and they sign it. But yeah, if we want as a community to stop things, we can, and that's a good example.
All right, let's move on to the next question, Andre. Thank you. We're going to, from Shahid, today we see conflicts between OEMs to manage the security keys, which are prone to be leaked. Is there any solution for appropriate key management?
not sure if I understand the question, but I would say, so key management is not easy. I agree. And it is, since I work in this industry, before I worked in the industry, I would have said, isn't that a fairly trivial problem? You have a PKI, your PKI servers are somewhere in a nuclear safe bunker, and you generate keys and then you just flash them into the units. And it turns out it's not that easy. So once we talk about keys in the manufacturing environment, things get pretty tough. So, I can tell you my company, we have in electronics, something like, I think, 10 manufacturing plants in different parts of the world with where we don't show up every day from the security team to check, hey, is this all good here? So it's the digital part is actually the easy one. The academic and digital part. Have a PKI. There are enough providers where you can outsource it if you like. Use common standards, like never have any global key in the actual module. Keep the global keys in the background. Have them completely outside. You can use things like Obtain principles. Obtain was the security mechanism for SOTA, where you can even distinguish the online servers that, where you expect, they might be hacked, and servers that hold the actual secrets that are completely offline. But I can tell you the tough part is the manufacturing plans. And then I would refer to use a proper security framework, whether that's ISO or NIST security framework, and get into the details there.
All right. Thank you, Andre. We have time for one more question. And are you going to be available after the talk to take additional questions in the lounge?
I need to slip out, but I'll be back then. So give me a little bit afterwards.
Of course. Just one last question from my side. How do you see open source tools, processes, methods? How is this going to play a role in the future of automotive cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the good news first, automotive becomes far more open to open source. I remember when I started working in this industry, even 15 years ago, everything open source was immediately rejected. It was like, no, we don't do open source for the software that ends up in the vehicle. Today, it's pretty common, Linux, Android, all these things fairly common in the industry. Open source tools. So trying to think, I don't think we use any open source software tools, but I don't think that's an issue of us being suspicious of it. I think it's far more that we miss the user friendliness. So I would argue, if there are OSS tools that can support us, then definitely we would jump on it, right? Hey, saving cost, it's perfect. There's nothing that would stop us. I think it's more what we feel is a lack of proper tool. And that's actually not true. We do use the common tools. But when we talk about the bigger tools like requirements management and these sort of things, it's not open source. When we talk about, like in our security testing lab, of course, we use open source tools. But that brings me back to one point that I tried to make. I think it is so incredibly tough to compare the quality of tools or solutions in general. And I would love our community to work on test criteria for it.
Yeah, like a quality standard. Yeah.
Yes.
Andre, thank you so much for the great presentation. We are out of time today, and coming up next, we have the panel discussion with Jezebel Serna and the rest of the panelists. So thank you once again, Andre, for your presentation keynote today, and we're looking forward to next year's presentation as well.
Thank you so much again, and anytime. Sorry for missing now the next break, but don't be shy. Send me an email.
We will do. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you.